Now, KwaZulu-Natal Premier Nomusa Dube-Ncube says progress is being made in resettling victims from the April floods. She's given an update on recovery efforts. Government has been criticized for the slow response to the crisis. Newzroom Afrika's Karinda Jagmohan has been covering the story for us and joins us live. Karinda, good afternoon once again. Now, the KZN Premier has given a detailed report or update on the recovery plan and touching on other issues such as the quarter-one's crime statistics. But it seems that beyond restoring the lives of the people within the province of the KZN, they are looking into the future, as she said, creating structures that will be resilient against future disasters, as well as looking at early warning systems. What was your take of her update?
Indeed, the topic of climate change was discussed here. Really, the province is in this position now following the April floods because of increasing global warming and climate change. Quite an issue here. You'll see the Premier is actually heading now to speak to the families, 47 families who will be moved to their new temporary emergency units. That's the name of the essentially student residential buildings that are no longer being used by students. Now the 47 families at this community hall will be moved into that building while permanent houses are being built for them nearby. But coming back to the coming back to the issue of climate change, essentially KwaZulu-Natal is in the position now because of climate change, increasing global warming. The Premier actually attended an event very recently in New York where climate change issues were discussed, and she says that one of the issues is that the province does not have proper access to funding to assist with disaster management, especially as we are seeing issues of natural disaster occurring more frequently. The Premier, speaking about climate change, said we need to, when building or rebuilding our various infrastructure, we need to build better to ensure that we can, or at least infrastructure along our coastline, can handle the ocean as sea levels continue to rise and there's more threats of disasters over the next few years. Take a listen to what the Premier had to say.
In the province of KwaZulu-Natal and the rest of the globe, we are faced with the reality of the climate change. And as a result of that, we are mindful that many of the constructions that are happening now, as we also approaching the rainy seasons, might be delayed and might be disturbed. However, when we receive the rains that are more than usual, we must also take into cognizance that we need to mobilize communities even at the ward level so that people are able to respond immediately, but also they know what to do in case of emergencies. We are also intensifying our early warning systems so that we are able to get clear predictions should there be changes in the weather patterns that are abnormal.
Well, that's the KZN Premier speaking about climate change matters. Of course, this comes as the families from this community hall will move out. There are over 80 community halls like this one where people are living in squalor conditions without privacy, overcrowding, sleeping on thin mattresses. And of course, there's the issue of security, especially for women and children at a number of community centers. Now, in her update, the Premier says that all of these over 80 community shelters have been linked to land parcels. These are pieces of land where there will be units, housing units built on, constructed on, so people can move there on a permanent basis. There's also going to be, she says, job creation, whereby those who have skills that are living in community shelters will be brought on to assist in the rebuilding or the building of temporary housing units or permanent housing units. Now, some of the issues is that currently a number of people are living at community shelters like this. While the KZN government is looking for permanent housing, they need to move them out of these shelters into what they call temporary emergency accommodation. That's where these families will go to now. And while they're living at this temporary emergency accommodation, that's an old student res block, nearby their permanent housing is being built. These are about 3-story apartments that are essentially very similar to RDP houses, but has the necessary requirements for a person to live a dignified life. So it's the process that's ongoing now. As well as the Premier reacting to the AG's report about government's slow response to this crisis, she says that this was actually a report based countrywide and not specifically looking at the KZN government, but also acknowledging that there has been a slow response. And she says this is because there is a slow process with regards to auditing. She says that officials are being very careful when it comes to processing the financial requirements for the disaster response because of the concerns of corruption, especially concerns raised over the past years when there has been disasters here in the province. In the meanwhile, you'll see behind me my colleague Gifton Corsi showing you packing up. People are packing up. The Premier just telling them where they can move their stuff to now. There's a bus nearby where the residents, the families will be taken in. Their belongings are going onto a truck and they will be moved to that old student res block that's about 10 kilometers away, where they'll be able to stay there for the next few months until their permanent houses are built. A relief for them, as earlier, remember, we spoke to a mother, we also spoke to a community leader here who said that they've been living in squalor conditions, overcrowding, having an issue where, many young children are getting sick frequently because of what is happening here, where there's no privacy within families. Now finally they're packing up and moving away from this community hall where there's not even proper ablution facilities. There are only 4 mobile toilets nearby that these 47 families have been using together for the past 5 months. So you can imagine there's some final relief now for them to live a better dignified life going forward.
Certainly, you can see the relief amongst those 47 families that will be moved to the 50-room building. That was our reporter, Karinda Jagmohan, coming to us from the KZN, giving us a summary of the Premier's recovery plan.